Okay, let's get started so that we will have enough time to cover the two presentations. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. On behalf of Karim Makour, the chair of SPIA, I would like to welcome to this SPIA webinar. Today, we have two presentations to share with this group. The first one will be done by Guanghong Xu from the University of California, Santa Cruz, that is working with the ILRI team in an evaluation of the East Coast fever vaccine in Africa. After his presentation, and then we will have some minutes for questions, but also we will have Nick Magnan, who is going to do the discussion of this paper, and some few minutes also for some questions. Then we have a second presentation that will be led by Yashodha and Marie-Charlotte Buisson from IMI. It's about the evaluation of the SKY program in India, and it's about solar irrigation. So it will also have a discussion. It's going to be Nick Hagerty, that he will also at the end will do the same, to provide some minutes of his feedback, and then open for general questions. So I don't want to delay further, and then so Guanghong, the floor is yours. Start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ricardo. Let me share my screen right now. Okay, can everyone see my screen right now?
Yes, we can see that. You have 30 minutes.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. It's really happy to be here to present our joint work with ILRI in front of all CG colleagues. Okay, this joint project named Demand and Liquidity Coordination to foster the adoption for livestock vaccinations, experimented with smallholder dairy cooperatives in Kenya. It's a joint project between ILRI Kenya and UCSC Economic Department, and also Indian School of Business and Williams College. So our project is still at a very, very early stage. So it's really happy to be here, and we are looking forward to have more comments and suggestions from all of you. All right, so we will present this project from the following perspectives. So first, what's the motivation? Why we study this? The second is, because of this specific context, we will give you some background information about our studies. And for sure, we will talk about our research questions and what's the position in the literature. And also we will talk more about our study design, because so far we're still at a very early stage. We don't have much data. So we only have the screening cooperative data, which wrapped up like 1 or 2 weeks ago, but we will share some baseline data from that survey. And at the end, we'll talk about our work plan and timelines. And hopefully, after all this, we can get some feedbacks and suggestions from all of you. All right. So first part, the motivation. So why we want to study this? I believe that for many of you, you already know that there is a disease called East Coast Fever, which is ECF. It is a deadly cattle disease that is transmitted by ticks. So without effective tick control, the calf mortality can be as high as 100%. According to our most recent dairy cooperative screening survey in Kenya, the data shows that on average, almost 40% of the farmers were affected by the ECF disease in last year in Kenya. Okay, so for this disease, there is one vaccination for it, which is named infection and treatment method. We call it ITM. So literature shows that this vaccination can provide a lifetime protection for the ECF and has a potential to reduce the cattle death, and for sure can reduce the cost for treating ticks. However, the take-up for this vaccine is still low in many areas in the region. When we write out the proposal for the study, we gain the data, we collected the data, actually we cleaned the data from the National Panel Survey in Tanzania in 2014. That data shows that only 11% of farmers vaccinated for their cattle against ECF. At that time, we don't have a good data for Kenya side, but since 1 week or 1 or 2 weeks ago, we wrapped up our cooperative screening survey in Kenya. And that data tells us that the average percentage of farmers get their cattle vaccinated is similar, which is 9.38%, but actually the median is 0%. So as I mentioned one slide ago, like this is a deadly disease. The cow mortality can be as high as 100%, but still the take-up is really, really low. Okay, for those of you who don't know anything about dairy farmers, about this disease and also this vaccination, let me give you some background information for that. You may ask, okay, so since the take-up rate for the ITM is so low, is that the only way to control, to manage this like ECF kind of pandemic? So usually we have two main ways to deal with the ECF. The ECF controlling methods, the first one would be the tick control by using a carrot size. So the most common method is like weekly spraying. It will cost you like 30 cents per week for each animal. And if you do the math, you will add up to $15 per year for one animal. All right, but for the ITM vaccination, this vaccination has been commercially available for over 10 years. It was first introduced in 1997, so it's pretty safe. And it can provide a lifetime protection against this disease, and it only costs you $8 to $10 per animal for the whole life. So compared to these two common methods, the ITM looks really cheap, right? But why people just don't use that? However, there is a technical issue for this vaccination that may not be that economically viable if you don't have a large number of cattle. What does that mean? So first of all, the vaccine can only be produced in large batches containing doses approximately 40 doses, right? And those doses, once you open that, once you use one of them, the entire batch, which means that all 40 doses must be used within 4 hours. So because of these technical issues, this ITM can only realistically be administrative only when 40 animals are available for the vaccination in one place, because you want to use all of them within 4 hours. So due to this technical issue, that this may, in our proposal, that this may be a biggest reason that why the take-up rate is so low. But how about the reality? Is this true from the data? So I can give you some more background information about the dairy farmers in Kenya. So according to the most recent cooperative screening data, so this is the data we mentioned before. Almost 40% of the farmers are affected by ECF. But at the same time, on average, only 9.38% of the farmers get their cattle vaccinated against the ECF. So if this is something that stops the take-up of that vaccine, then how about the herd size for the dairy farmers in Kenya? So on average, we have sorry about this typo. So on average, we have a herd size of 3.72, and for the median, it is 3. So imagine that you are a farmer, you only have 3 cattle. How could you afford to buy like 40 doses only for those 3 cattle, right? So if that's the reality, then this must be a really important issue we want to address so that farmers can get better access to the vaccine. All right, so after we discuss all of the background information about what's our motivation, and I want to first directly tell you our main research question here. The first one is, okay, if that's the technical issue is the biggest reason that stop farmers from adopting this ITM vaccine, so can we do something to help farmers buy what we call demand aggregation events? So imagine that, okay, maybe for you only have 3 cattle, but for your neighbors, they have 4 or 5 cattle. But for some other people in your cooperatives, they may have 10 or 20 cattle. So why not just aggregate all of your demands together, and then we arrange a vaccination events for you, so that everybody can come to get their cattle vaccinated. So that's our first question. What is the effect of improving access to this ITM vaccination via this demand aggregation events on this vaccination rates? Okay, the second main question we want to ask is, okay, even though we organize this kind of vaccination events for you, but still as we mentioned before, that the ITM vaccination will still cost you like $8 to $10 per animal. And if you have several animals, like if you have 10 animals, which means that you have to prepare for $80 to $100 for that, right? So then we're asking, okay, so given this demand aggregation events, given you have a better access to this vaccine, so could we improve the result by adding a one treatment arm, which is a checkoff system, which basically means that we set aside part of your milk cells to that part of the milk cells only for the ITM vaccination. So that's what we call the checkoff system. So while this presence of the checkoff system increase the effective the access on the vaccination rates, that's our two main questions. For sure, we will also collected a lot of outcomes like the investment in the cattle and the milk production or milk sales and the farmers' profits and the home milk consumptions, all those more downstream outcomes. We're also interested to look at that. And also we will ask the same question, like, after calculating all the costs for organizing the aggregation events or the activities, is it profitable for the vaccinators to work with the dairy cooperatives, right? If this is profitable for them, and if this is, helping farmers, so why not do this, expand this project, right? So that's basically our two other secondary research questions. Okay, so how does our study relate to the existing literatures? So there are two main literatures. The first one would be the liquidity literature. So Pasolini Dupas from the Stanford University, and also John Robinson from University of California, Santa Cruz, who is my advisor, they did a study in Kenya in 2013, and they basically tried to link farmers to a non-interest bank account to see whether that treatment can help farmers to save more. And also, Prina did the same thing in Nepal in 2015. And later on, because of their studies both show that this saving techniques can increase their savings and also their allocations to some big investment like education. Then the founders asked them to expand their studies to 3 more countries, which is Uganda, Malawi, and Chile. So then they did another expanding study about what's the effective savings techniques on your savings and also investment in the productive assets. So they finished that study in 2018, and the result shows that for sure those saving techniques can increase their savings among those active users. But when they try to find more downstream effects, it's in process to detect that. But anyway, so all those literature shows that farmers, like people all over the world in different contexts, like what I said, in different countries, the Uganda, Malawi, Chile, or Kenya, they may have difficulty accessing liquidity to make a lumpy investment. In our context, the lumpy investment would be like $8 to $10 for the ITM vaccination, right? And also, even though the farmers have the cash flow, it may take some time to save up to $8 per animal. And if they have more than one animal, it will save, just like I said, like if you have 10 animals, it will be $80 to $100. So farmers may lack liquidity when it is needed. So that's why from this, sort of literature, we come up with the checkoff system to help them. And also you can equivalently think of the demand aggregation intervention as kind of, sort of like, lower the bar for the entering the ITM vaccination. It's also in another way to say, helping with the, savings problem or liquidity problem. And another sort of literature I want to mention here is, a large literature in the behavioral economics and personal finance shows that people are more likely to be able to save money if it is made. Sorry? Sorry? Any question?
No, go ahead. I think somebody's with the mic off. I will close it.
Okay. So large literature in the behavioral economics and personal finance also shows that people are more likely to be able to save money if it is made the default option. So what does that mean? Basically, I can show you some examples. Toller and Banerjee in 2004, in their studies in US, they study a smart program, basically means save more for tomorrow. So employees in the company, that if the company say, okay, we give you a default option of saving how much percent to this kind of smart programs, and employees is kind of hesitate, or mainly most of them just follow the default options. They don't change it. And this is another same study done by Carroll in 2009. And they also studied the 401k in US. It's basically a defined contribution retirement account in the US. And they find that the optimal default options can help to increase the employees' contributions to this 401k. And also, there's another study in 2018 by Sylvia and Vanderwell. They study this weekly. So for the children group, they kind of like encourage them, or not encourage them. The default option is like you have a weekly payment into a bank account in India. So that study basically shows that in the children group, the people save 131% more than control group. So all this literature is trying to tell us, like, if you give in our context, it's dairy farmers, a default option to say, okay, we just make it to say, as long as you sell how much of your milk, and we will set aside a percentage of your milk selling just for this ITM vaccination. And actually, I take a look at data I forget to include in the slides. For the cooperative screening survey we have done 1 week or 2 weeks ago, the data shows 78% of the cooperatives, they already have a checkoff system. So it's a well-established system that, they are getting used to it, that, you are set aside part of my milk sales for some other input purchase behaviors or something. But when we take a look at the data from, okay, so you have a checkoff system for different purposes, but what's the percentage of cooperatives which has a checkoff system only for the ECF vaccination? Only 3% of them has this checkoff system only for the ECF vaccination. So that's why we have a room, both in the literature and also from the baseline data, that the checkoff system may increase the effect of the aggregation events on the vaccination rates. All right, so we have talked about a lot of the research questions and literature review. So what's the overall picture of the study design? Which is quite straightforward. So we have a lot of dairy cooperatives in Kenya. So we will divide them randomizedly into 3 categories. The first one will be group 1, which is a pure control. We don't do anything with it. So that will consist of 40 cooperatives. So for the group 2, we will introduce the demand aggregation intervention to them, basically just like I described. Okay, we will collect, what's your demand for the ITM vaccination and your neighbors and all other dairy farmers in your cooperatives. And that is group 2. We will have 12 cooperatives in that. And for group 3, we'll also have 20 cooperatives. But on that, it's not just the demand aggregation events, but it's demand aggregation plus the checkoff system. Okay, then compare between group 2 and group 1. We will see the effect of demand aggregation on the ITM vaccination take-up. And if we compare group 2 to group 3, we will see the effect of what's the additional effect induced by the checkoff system in the cooperative. So basically, that's the overall picture of our research design here. All right, so for the work study location, so the project will target dairy cooperatives throughout Kenya. And right now, we just finished the dairy cooperative screening survey in Kenya. And we already have 104 cooperatives expressed their interest to participate in the study. And I also attached the timeline for our work here. So right now we are June in 2021. So we just finished the screening survey. And right now the baseline survey is almost ready for the farmer level. So I forget to mention that we plan to enroll 30 farmers per cooperatives to do the baseline survey and also some follow-up surveys. And that survey is down. And right now we are we're recruiting enumerators to implement this baseline survey. Hopefully we can get everything done by the end of July. Okay, so after all this, our next behavior, our next action would be the intervention announcement, basically the demand aggregation intervention announcement, which will happen in August and September. And starting from September this year, we will announce the financing intervention. Basically, it's the checkoff system among the cooperatives. And we anticipate to see the vaccination events happen on early 2022. And we will, coordinate with vaccinators, coordinate with dairy cooperatives and dairy farmers in the cooperatives to do this vaccination fair events, because after the demand aggregation and after 3 to 4 months of checkoff system, so we anticipate this will happen on early 2022. And for sure, we will do some follow-up surveys to collect information about what we describe like some downstream effect. For sure, the most important one would be the vaccination rates, right? And also we will collect information about the milk consumption, the milk sales, and the investment in cattle, and so on. Okay, so after all this, if the project goes well, we will have a final report done and the academic paper done by the end of 2023. So again, this is still at a very, very early stage. We are actually just here. We still have a lot to do and a lot of detailed stuff to determine about the intervention and how to organize things better. So basically, that's all for my presentation today. And thank you, everyone, and looking forward to your suggestions and comments.
Thank you very much, Guanghong. I think it was a good presentation. Then I would like to invite Nick Magnon to please provide his comments to this presentation. Nick.
Thank you, Rico.
Hello, everybody. That was very interesting. Ricardo, I'm trying to share my screen.
Yes, please do.
Permission.
Just quickly to say, Jigesu, we will have a space for questions after the discussant.
Ricardo?
Yes, are you able to share your screen? No, I think it seems it's frozen.
Hello?
Yes, Nick, I can hear you, but I don't see your.
Yeah, I don't see anything as well.
Just let's wait a minute. He may reconnect.
I think he's reconnecting.
He's back.
All right, I'm back on with an alternate internet connection here.
Are you trying now to share your screen?
Could you?
Yes, we
share
can.
the slides? I mean, I'm trying, but I don't know how.
No problem. Mina, can you share the screen, please?
Here we go. And
yeah, do you see that?
Yes,
already there.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
All right. You can just go to the next slide, please. So I thought this was it's a really interesting study, and it has a lot of applications elsewhere in agriculture, just where size can be a barrier to input use, and you see it with fertilizer, and you see it with mechanization and all kinds of inputs that require high transport cost, including extension and veterinary services. The case you're presenting here is especially tricky because of the nature of the vaccine. As you said, it's available in bundles of 40 doses. It needs to be administered by a highly trained individual. It needs to be used quickly, just 4 hours. So you need 40 cows, likely from 12, 15, 20 different farmers to pass through a specific place in a 4-hour window. It's not easy. It requires a lot of coordination. And what's more is it can't just be any farmers. They need to be farmers that want the vaccine and are ready to pay for it. You have this experimental design with 3 groups, the demand aggregation group, and then a demand aggregation plus checkoff group, and control. And you're proposing to split them 20, 20, 40. Now, treatment hasn't been assigned yet in reality. So, I'm wondering about this 20, 20, 40 split. It seems to me that this is designed with the intent of being able to catch smaller impacts of the aggregation intervention, the 2 groups combined versus a control, and larger effects of the checkoff, where you have the 20 demand aggregation plus checkoff versus the 20 demand aggregation only. And this sets up a potentially tricky situation where if the checkoff effect is really, really strong, as it seems you anticipate it will be, then the aggregation effect across those 2 aggregation groups is going to be the average of a stronger effect on vaccine take-up and a much weaker one. And that could make this average harder to detect because it will be smaller than if it was just the full demand aggregation plus checkoff treatment. And it will also be noisier. So if the checkoff effect is really strong, then it could set up problems for detecting the aggregation effect. On the other hand, if the checkoff effect is weak, then you're going to have a more consistent aggregation effect across the 2 aggregation effects. So this are the aggregation groups. So that'll allow you to estimate the aggregation effect well. But you could lack power to estimate the smaller checkoff effect with the 20 groups in the checkoff and the 20 groups in the non-checkoff treatments. So perhaps, I'm imagining that you've thought through this a lot, but my question, to think about would be why 20, 20, 40 instead of a more even split of, say, 27, 27, 27. All right. When reading the proposal and listening to the presentation, I couldn't gather where these interventions will happen, and I think it could matter a lot in terms of how well they work. The information sessions, are those going to happen in the collection center, or are they going to happen in the potentially many villages where co-op members live? I assume that a co-op serves many villages, and so the farmers could be quite spread out. And then the other question is where the vaccinations are going to occur. Are these vaccination drives going to be at a central location where there might be high transport cost, but you could conceivably have a lot of farmers from a lot of different villages come? Or are these going to be village by village where the transport costs will be low for the farmers, but where you may not have enough demand in a given village? All right. And then also, where's data collection going to happen? Is this going to happen in the villages? Because if you have many villages that are served by a given co-op, serving 13 individuals across these many villages associated with a co-op is going to be pretty inefficient, especially with in-person surveys. So are you going to first subsample villages within a co-op and then farmers within a village? Or are you going to sample farmers all across these potentially many, many villages? Or are you going to collect data at the collection center or the co-op? If co-op members go there regularly, like to sell their milk on a daily basis, then this could work and it could be a lot cheaper. Then another thing I thought of is whether it would be possible to get real-time milk collection data at the collection center. You'd have a lot of data points, you'd have pretty precise data, and it would be easy to collect from the treatment and the control. And so this could be a way to collect data from all farmers that are coming into the collection center, which would include your sample farmers if they sell through the co-op. All right, and then a couple odds and ends. I was wondering if having vaccinated cows in an area decreases disease pressure overall. Is there a public benefit to this kind of vaccination? I think it'd be really interesting in a perfect world to have a free vaccine treatment, because this could be a very interesting comparison to the checkoff treatment. How close does that checkoff system get you to something that's fully subsidized? And I know it's also interesting to compare the checkoff system to one where there is just the aggregation events. But I also think it'd be interesting to look at the other end of the spectrum where you got the full subsidy. So in a perfect world where you could get more treatments, that would be great. I'm wondering how big the checkoff payments would be relative to the value of milk collected. And, you know, a related question, how long is it going to take the farmers to accumulate enough checkoff money to pay for the vaccine? And also, would you give the vaccines before all the money is collected so you could stay on your timeline? So I understand that your main outcome of interest here and the one that you're powered to get is vaccination rate, but I would like to see some power calculations or some discussion of power for other outcomes. My generic power calculations gave me a standard deviation of 0.26, which doesn't seem hopeless for capturing effects on other outcomes you're looking at, like the cost of tick spraying, animal sickness, and death. You say you're going to estimate local average treatment effects for those outcomes, but I think the ITT estimates might be just as important. And finally, I think it's great that you're going to look at vaccinator profitability in addition to farmer profitability, so you can kind of see how sustainable this thing is going to be from both ends. So yeah, really exciting study. I'm eager to follow it and see how it turns out.
Thank you very much, Nick. That is very valuable, your comments, and I appreciate the time for making those. And so I will give time to Guanghong if you want to comment or respond some of the comments that Nick made before going into more general questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think all those comments are really helpful and insightful. And I take some notes when I listen to the presentation. And the first one in terms of the power. I guess, you know, the 40-20-20 is something we basically calculated that, you know, based on we basically use the inter-village correlations in Tanzania, because at that time we don't have a really good data for the ITM vaccination in Kenya. So based on that calculation, this power is good, it's okay. And I truly believe, I mean, agree with you that, you know, if we can get more, if we can get a larger study sample, that would be wonderful. And also related to one of your questions asking about when or where will this aggregation events or this data collection activities happen. So basically, we also are considering some scenarios that is not, you know, randomized among the cooperatives only, but also we consider, especially just like you mentioned, for some really large cooperatives, they are covering, you know, a lot of villages. So we'll start considering, like, you know, what about the randomized units can be like collection centers? And you also mentioned about one really great question, that whether we can get some, you know, milk cells real data in the collection centers. I mean, for some cooperatives, to my best knowledge, they have a well-established, you know, digitized system. I believe that they have those kind of data there. So that could be one possibilities. I think that's one thing we can explore, and also you mentioned about the spillover effects for the vaccination. I mean, to my knowledge, because this disease is transmitted by ticks, right? So if you have a sick cattle, then the disease can be transmitted from one cattle to another one. But my colleagues from URI here can correct me if I'm wrong. So I do think there's some positive spillovers to detect, if we have the well-shaped study design or the data collection. And for the checkoff system, to be honest, we haven't decided yet, okay, what's the percentage of the checkoff system from the milk and how long it will be. Basically, we will keep that, as long as they want. And especially we don't want to set up a time to say, okay, so until this time, you will stop the checkoff system. Because one of the outcome we want to study is, once we help to set up this kind of checkoff system, well, this induce a long-term or lasting entry afterwards, even after we are leaving. So the treatment groups have a higher vaccination rates compared to control group. So, and for the power for other outcomes, yeah, that will be interesting to detect. And yeah, that's another good point. Anyway, thank you so much for all the comments and looking forward to discuss more with you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we can open the floor for other questions. Jigesu, you're still there? You want to tell us your question?
Yeah, I think one of the questions is already asked. The other question that I had was, you mentioned that the cost of thick control could go as high as $15, I guess, per animal. What I would like to know is what percentage of farmers are using thick control at the moment, paying that kind of money? Because now when you do this experiment, you will have certain percentage of farmers who are using or paying to control through tick control, but there are also probably more others who are not paying anything. So your control group will be heterogeneous in terms of farmers who are paying to control ticks and those who are not. And I'm wondering how this will affect your average treatment effect estimation when you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. So yeah, we should have know more about how many farmers are using tick controls generally, and I'm not sure whether we collected that in the cooperative screening survey, but I can definitely check that data later on. That's important to know as well. I agree with you. But for at the same time, the cost for the tick control is not just like $15 per animal, but it's $15 per animal per year. So that's pretty high. But just like you said, it could be the case that farmers just don't do anything for that. That could be something we can investigate. Yeah, thank you.
Niels?
Yeah, thanks. Just to expand a little bit on this issue about tick control. So there are other diseases which also transmitted by ticks. So farmers, even with the ECF vaccination, they will probably not be able to dispense with tick control completely. But ECF is the most important disease, and the biggest effect would be the reduction in the frequency from once to twice per week to once or twice per month. Yes, you are right. There are farmers who don't control ticks at all. They just put up with the calf losses mainly, and those calves which survive, they are also immune to the disease for their later life. These are usually pastoralists, extensive cattle keepers, as in northern Tanzania or in northern Kenya. The areas we have selected are emerging dairy systems where there is a market linkage through dairy, but not complete zero grazing systems. So in zero grazing systems, the high intensity systems, tick control is not that important because as animals don't go out to graze, the chances of it being infected with ticks are less. And in these areas, most farmers actually have to control ticks because the dairy crossbred animals as they are to some extent often being kept, are really susceptible to ACF. So we think that of course, there will be some variation, but it will not be the big variation between pastoralists and high-intensity dairies because of the areas we have chosen. Yeah, I think that was all as a support to Guanghong on that issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Niels.
Thanks, Niels. Any other question or comment?
I would also have one comment to Nick. So the stratification, you suggested stratification for the farmer sampling within cooperatives. And the cooperatives we have selected, as Guanghong has already mentioned, have a huge variety of size and scope. Some of them have only tens of farmers of members, some have thousands. And it'll be a bit of a struggle to apply the same strategy to all. Also, the power calculations are sort of at the limit, so introducing a stratification would definitely decrease the power of our sample. So that's why, for our proposal, we did decide to go for simple random sampling, even if it means that enumerators have to travel around a lot more than they in many surveys. Then it is practiced in many surveys. But as Guanghong said, we are already revisiting the opportunities of splitting large cooperatives, that they can take several treatments at the same time. This is already happening in large cooperatives who cover several counties. Counties are implementing their own support programs, and so cooperative members have access to different support programs depending on which county they live in. And then another point, you had mentioned the comparison to free vaccines. In principle, the ECF vaccine, because it is so expensive, is not really made for public campaigns. And so that's why in all promotion efforts throughout the region, the private sector approach has always been favored. However, recently, these Kenyan counties who have received or been interested in rolling out development programs have found the ECF vaccine an easy target and have been promoting subsidized vaccinations. And we were worried whether that would severely contaminate our sample and make our study difficult. But in the latest discussions we've had with the cooperatives we've been talking to, they said, well, in theory, there is this rollout, but of course, resources are limited, and then it only reaches a few farmers. So it is still a topic we are discussing. I think in the long term, sustainably, it cannot be imagined that this vaccine will receive sustainable long-term full support, like it happens with other vaccines. But with this one, it probably is less important. And because of this, we are also targeting to disseminate the vaccine through existing vaccinators. So most cooperatives have some sort of link through animal health services, and these are the ones we're going to target to be involved in the checkoff systems for our treatments. I think that's enough.
Thanks, Niels. I think I have Gush Berhane.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. This is very interesting work and look forward for the results. Just a quick question I have following Nick's presentation also. Can you explain a little bit about how effective the detection would be if you do the baseline sample survey at the cooperative level, and the treatment is the survey is at the individual or village level, and the treatment is at the cooperative level, or how the two would be matching in terms of detecting impact? Thank you. If that is the way you're thinking this.
Guanghong, you go ahead.
Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking the intervention is at the cooperative level or more aggregate level, but the study sample is at the individual level, farmer level, and how could we detect the effect? Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty common that, you know, a lot of studies, like, for example, the cash transfer program, you give a, you have, you know, treatment villages and you have all eligible people in the village, you get this intervention, and all the outcome can only be measured at that level, right? I mean, this is quite common. I don't see any issue or problem for this study, actually.
But of course, it does mean that the power is also limited because we randomize at the cooperative level. We're thinking about having more lower scale randomization, but the danger of spillovers and the administrative difficulties of applying checkoff systems and these information events in separate units in small cooperatives were really difficult. So that's why for the proposal, we said it will definitely work at the cooperative level. And if we have opportunities to split them a little bit, to have more units for randomization, we will take advantage of that, but it is not yet completely guaranteed that we can do that.
Yeah, I guess a better answer to your question is since all those, let's say we choose 13 farmers for each cooperative, because we're randomly choosing those 13 farmers, so they are a good representative for this cooperative. So their outcomes can represent for this cooperative. And actually, you know, you don't necessarily need to survey any single one in that cooperative, because, you know, because they are in the same village, they are in the same cooperatives, where anticipate they have a, you know, high correlation with each other. So you can increase more survey farmers in that cooperatives, but it won't help too much with your study, because the power is, you know, the effect of the power is reduced because of the correlation within the cooperatives. So actually, the better way would be you increase the randomized units. Basically, we increase more, you know, cooperatives, or we increase more, you know, if we decided to do at the collection centers, we increase that randomization units. That will help a lot with to detect the effect. So you don't necessarily to, you know, survey any single farmers in that treatment units. Does that answer your question?
I will encourage, if you have more questions or comments, please to write in the chat so that we can move to the second presentation, because we are running out of time. I would like to thank again Guanghong for the presentation, also Nick for the comments, and Niels also and others who participated. So I would like to invite Yashodha and Marie-Charlotte for the second presentation.
Right. Okay. Hi, everybody. Yes, I had echo, but that's fine. Okay. Well, thank you for being still there, and thank you to SPIA for the opportunity to present this work, which is again an ongoing work. We are working on Yashodha is working on the design now. Yashodha, if you can come in presentation mode, awesome. Yes. So what we are working on is an impact evaluation of the grid-connected solar irrigation program in Gujarat. And I would say it's quite different from what was presented to us earlier. Here we have a program which is running, and we are dealing with all the Lessman bias constraints, and that's also a complex program where the first thing is to understand what our controls are. So that's where we are, and you will see that. Briefly, to introduce you the context of solar irrigation in India. Solar irrigation in India has huge potential, but also a main challenge. So the potential are quite obvious. It's in terms of farmer income. So if we are converting the existing diesel pump or the electric pump to solar pump, then that's just a cut in the cost for the farmers. And it's also simply easier for them to get access to irrigation, as compared to sometimes the poor grid connectivity, the interruption, etc. That's one on the farmer side. Second, it has obvious benefits in terms of climate change mitigation. The conversion to solar is a way to reduce the greenhouse gas emission and also a way to reduce black carbon emission when it's a conversion from diesel to solar. That's a way to help India to meet the NDC commitment. Just to give you a number, that's 15 million tons of carbon emission, which are coming from agriculture. Then the other benefit is on the energy sector. Agriculture is an important consumer of electricity in India. So if we by moving to solar, that's also just reducing the burden on the production of electricity, and then bringing more quote unquote electricity to other sectors. And that's also a way to reduce the financial burden because of the huge power subsidy which are existing in India and which are a major burden for several states. So that's the potential. On the other side, there is a major risk, a major challenge, which is about groundwater depletion, simply because when you have access to energy and therefore to water near zero marginal cost, then how do you make sure that water is not depleting further? And we are in India where the groundwater depletion is already acute. So this point has been raised by some IWMI researcher at an early point when really solar irrigation was taking up in India, and they have thought of different solutions to overcome this challenge. So one option would be to think of bundling between the solar pumps and some water saving technologies. But with that option, this will have major regulatory constraint. How do we put that into place? It's quite complicated. And then the paradox of water efficiency is now well established. So then the other option is to think about the economic incentive. And that's where this idea of energy pricing through the grid connection has came from. So the idea is to allow the farmers, by connecting the solar pumps to the grid, to allow them to sell the excess of power and therefore to give a price for this power that they can choose to use for pumping and or for selling to the grid. Next, Yashodha. Yashodha, if you can move to the next one. I'm not seeing that yet. Okay, the next one was just about setting the scene of solar irrigation in India. So that's the map of solar irrigation pumps as of now or recently. So there is about 250,000 solar irrigation pump in India. It has started around 2010 with the National Solar Mission. And what is important for us is what has happened in Gujarat in a pilot which was run by IWMI with CCAV and IWMI Tata support. And in this pilot, there was the first cooperative farmers who got electric pumps and they get the connection to the grid. So that was really the first case where this idea of connection to the grid was piloted. And this has been successful enough to influence the government of Gujarat when they designed their SPIA program. So now the SPIA program is running since 2018. That's the impact evaluation that Yashodha will present to you. And it's actually a net metering program. Yashodha will explain what does that mean. And what we are doing here, focusing on this SPIA program in Gujarat, is also meaningful for other programs which are happening in other states of India with or without grid connection. And that's also meaningful and important in terms of the implication it has at a national level, because now in India there is a national program, which is the KUSUM program, which also has a component of grid connection. So what we are telling now, or what we will be saying soon on the SPIA program, is really important to motivate and to better understand what's happening in other parts of the country. So Yashodha will take you through the presentation. I'll simply say very quickly that what we are working on now is part of the solar project. So the solar project is a Swiss Development Corporation funded project. And we have impact assessment component not only in India, but also in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Over to you, Yashodha.
Thank you, Marie. Hi, everyone. So thank you, Marie, for setting up the scenario for the study. As already Marie said about how increasing attention has been paid for the grid connector solar pumps as a policy avenue to manage the demand as well as in turn manage the agriculture water requirement. So, however, there is a limited empirical evidences on the impact of grid-connected solar pumps in India. So basically, to understand how this grid-connected solar pumps impacts on the energy consumption at the farmer level, and then what are the other farm level adjustment, both at the intensive margin as well as extension margin, are observed. So those impacts needs to be estimated, and that's where this study is motivated to provide that empirical evidence. So just to give a background where this study fits in the literature. So this fits in the literature of water for energy food nexus, where in the developing country these nexus are quite strong to manage the demand for the groundwater. Mostly the energy prices have been used as an instrument to manage these demands. In the interest of food security, in the early times the energy prices have been completely subsidized in India. And it is estimated that any small variations in the flat, even the subsidized price, has a less impact on the demand for the groundwater. So it's quite price inelastic. However, there are studies which have estimated if we move the energy prices from subsidized to the marginal cost of energy as such, it has indicated that it would drastically adversely affect the agriculture sector and have a distributional consequences because of the large number of small and marginal farmers. And further, the studies have also highlighted it not only affects the self-consumption of groundwater for agriculture, but also it affects the irrigation services provided in the informal groundwater market settings where many small and marginal farmers access irrigation through such markets. So then the second best options the government has resorted is for energy rationing. That means restrict the number of hours of energy being given so that they can manage the demand or water extraction. However, many studies have found that the rationing has been quite easy from the political point of view to implement in India. But however, the studies finds that this actually inefficiently allocates the water, as there are many heterogeneous there are lots of heterogeneity in terms of production across Indian settings. But still, the acuteness in terms of the water extraction has continued till date, and instead of using the price as an instrument, now the conservation regimes have come back with them let's provide the entitlements and then see if provide an incentive to see if an unit saved in the energy, which will become in turn shows the conservation in terms of water. So there are pilots have been done on the energy entitlements in the sense users have been provided with an energy quantum of energy, which is similar to the water rights elsewhere in Australian markets and US markets. So based on the historical energy consumption, this has been provided to the users, and any unit saved on the energy will be incentivized, where the farmers will get a price for it. So these pilots have been implemented in Gujarat and Punjab to see if it affects the groundwater consumption and thus conserves water. So the studies in Gujarat and Punjab showed mixed result, where in Gujarat it did not show any significant effect on the consumption of electricity and thus water. And in Punjab, it shows in few months this energy entitlements have reduced the energy consumption across the farmers in few months. So now coming to the grid-connected solar pumps, which are invariably are similar to that of the energy entitlements, where and farmers are assured about the energy that they require historically. But it is now provided through solar panels, where they have an independence, seeing in terms of energy generation, and now low interruption because there is no rationing, because it is now independently can be generated, and now it's sort of green energy that they could use. And any unit, like it's like, they are producing the energy, and any unit that they will be selling, saving, and instead of using it for pumping and selling it to the electricity, they will get at the fixed price. That means there is a real trade will be happening between the producers of this electricity, which is like, farmers, to the electricity utilities with the fixed buyback tariff. However, it is anticipated that this buyback tariffs will incentivize the farmer to effectively use energy and thus judiciously use groundwater. So, however, in a technical or theoretical point of view, that hello?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, technical point of view, it is that the level of tariff needs to be set for it to be effectively incentivize farmers to change their energy consumption behavior. So it should be to the level that at least it should be equal to the marginal opportunity cost of the energy usage. So which is not quite established yet in the literature. So this study will be contributing to the literature of energy. Can grid connected solar pumps become a panacea for energy, water, food nexus, and also contributes in the policy arena of climate resilience agriculture. Before I go to the exact program details, so I would just want to give the study background or context of Gujarat in terms of electricity policy that the state has taken. This is one of the states which has taken a number of energy reforms since independence to promote as well as the curb the groundwater, promote agriculture as well as curb groundwater extraction. So in the early 60s and 70s, mostly energy is completely subsidized for farm usage, mainly to increase the production and increase the irrigation area through increased adoption of tube wells. By 1998, the government realized that the huge subsidy cost, and then they shifted to flat rate electricity tariffs. That means like there is a fixed rate being fixed for size of the irrigation pump. Yet I did not like completely reduce the groundwater dependency. Actually, by 2000, the energy dependency by agricultural sector has grown up about 40%, and groundwater availability has decreased. That means now they had to drill even more deeper. And agriculture became another competing sector for electricity usage. So by 2004, the government started to think like, to implement the meter tariff, but politically it was not feasible. So as a second best solution, they implemented the rationing. That means they restrict the number of hours of electricity that is being given to the agriculture. Before it used to be, before 2004, they used to get 24 hours of electricity. From 2004 onwards, it has been restricted to 8 hours. And state has made a larger effort to segregate the feeders between the agriculture and non-agricultural feeders to improve the quality of energy supplied to these sectors. However, by 2011, the electricity utilities have realized that because of not metering, the energy accounting become an issue, and then huge loss that many electricity utilities were under huge loss. So in 2011, the state brought the metering policy. So whichever the new connections which have come after 2011, for drilling tube well as well as connecting the pump to electricity, they're all metered, and they have to pay instead of the flat rate. They have to now pay based on the unit that they consume. However, the price charged is again subsidized, which is about 1 cent per kilowatt that they use. And from 2011 onwards, although they kind of improved in terms of energy auditing, but the issue is increased electricity losses, which is about up to 30 to 40% of the total electricity is being under the consumer under the agriculture sector is lost due to transport and distribution losses. So then they brought the SKY program, which is a grid connected solar program, to increase the to reduce those inefficiencies in the system, like reduce the loss, transport and distribution losses, and to give the daytime electricity supply to the agricultural sectors. So currently in Gujarat, they have both rationing, that is like, farmers get 8 hours of electricity, and also they have different 2 types of tariff structures, both flat and unit rate, unit pricing, which is again like the depends on when the pump when the tubewell has been approved for the connection. In the both price regime, the power is quite high, subsidized, in the sense like the price charged, which is 0.6 paisa or 6 paisa per unit, but the actual market price is about 6 rupees per unit. So it's quite subsidized. So the farmers still have a less incentive to save energy and water. So thus, from motivated from the IMI study, IMI pilot, IMI Dundi pilot that had happened in 2016, government of Gujarat realized that okay, they could actually use this they got motivated and use that opportunity to go for green energy as well as reduce the transactional losses that was happening, and also increase the farmer income through providing additional source of income, and also incentivize the farmers to judiciously use. So they framed Suryashakti Kisan Yojana, which we shortly call it as SKY scheme. About this scheme, it's mainly targets the farmers who are already connected to the grid. But for the farmer to be beneficiary, at least 70% of the farmers within that agricultural feeder needs to be agreed to get solarized, and then only such feeders will be selected for the as a beneficiary under the scheme. Once 70% of the farmers agree to participate, then the enrolled farmer will get a grid-connected solar pump, which is about 1.2 times of the current HP capacity of the pump. That means if a farmer has 1 HP pump, he would get a solar pump, solar panels which can produce, which has a capacity of 1.2 kilowatt. Coming to the finances, as solar investments are quite huge in the beginning. For it to facilitate, government of India has provided 30% of subsidy in the beginning, while the 70% needs to be paid by the farmer himself. However, because it is a huge amount, so only 5% been asked as to pay by the consumer in the beginning. Rest 65% has been mobilized through loans, which is supported by government of Gujarat again. Once the agricultural feeder got beneficiary under this SKY program, the feeder gets 12 hours of electricity. Remember, there was the rationing is only 8 hours for the normal feeders, where the SKY program has not been installed. It's mainly to to give them more time space to to keep the grid active, so that they can inject the excess energy throughout the time period. So basically, this 12 hours has been set based on the sunset to sunrise, sunrise to sunset. Coming to the technical design of the program. So yeah, this is a agricultural feeder which is catering energy to 6 farmers. Of these 6 farmers, one of the farmers has not enrolled, so he will be getting only 8 hours of electricity, while all these other farmers will get 12 hours of electricity, both to draw as well as to inject the energy. For those who are entering into the program, so before the program, they were only drawing energy from the grid, and now they have an extra unit which has been set up to generate their own energy, which they can feed into the grid, and the pump can draw actually energy from the grid. At the end of the tunnel, they have fit the next net metering facility, which can assess how much energy is being injected as well as drawn. Based on that, the billing will takes place. So the excess energy that the consumer feeds into the grid will be bought by the electricity utilities, which in India it is called they are called as DESCOMs. So these DESCOMs will buy at the rate of 3.5 rupees per kilowatt. To incentivize the farmers to pay off 65% of the total cost of the loan, additional 3.5 rupees have been given as an evacuation-based incentive by government of Gujarat for the first 7 years. But after 7 years, they would only get 3.5 rupees, which is a price fixed by the DESCOM to buy back this excess energy. the operational details of the programs. So there is no set random selection of these feeders to be part of this program. So it's mainly depends on the interest of the farmers as well as how DESCOM is active to spread this technology in the service area. Currently, there are 92 feeders, agriculture feeders have been solarized in the state under this program. So whoever wants to be part of, like the consumers who are part of this program, irrespective of whichever the price regime they were before the SPIA, they have to accept, if they want to be part of the SPIA program, they have to accept the meter billing. That means they have to convert to unit rate tariff if they were in the flat rate regime before. If they import the energy, they will have to. That means, like, if they're using more energy for pumping than what they generate, they would have to pay the unit rate, which is also been set in the non-solarized case as well. If they're exporting excess energy, they would have to pay. They would get at that would be bought at 3.5 rupees per unit. So enrollments has two different criteria here. First, like technical committee has to come and assess whether it is suitable for the solar panel installment. Once it gets go, then the consumer needs to produce documents, mainly land ownership documents, which is used as a mortgage against the loan. Currently, for the net energy being sold and then net revenue is calculated on an annual basis and billing is done at an annual basis. Of the total revenue, they will first deduct the loan installment that is supposed to pay for that year, and the rest will be paid to bank account of the farmer. So given with this aim that the SPIA has set up to provide an incentive for farmers to change their energy consumption, as well as provide daytime electricity, and also provide a source of income and reduce the losses. So we have in mind to assess the impact of this program, whether it is achieving the objective that it has set out. Our objective is of twofold. One is to look at the impact of this program on the energy consumed for pumping. Another is like to look at the impact at the extension and intensive margin. That is, like, what are the farming decisions that the farmer has taken up, and how, like, the participation rates in the water markets. We wanted to assess this the impact of the program at two levels. One at the feeder level as well as at the farmer level. At the feeder level, we want to assess how much energy being used for pumping, and what is the percentage of commercial feeder losses that has been happening, and the frequency of transformer burnout. For all these outcomes, mostly we will be measuring them using the secondary data from the utility records. By comparing with the SPIA feeder to the non-SPIA feeders, either using the DID or the synthetic control method, depending on the historical data that we would be able to get from the utility records. At the farmer level, we have both energy outcomes as well as the non-energy outcomes. Energy outcomes, we are mostly looking at the energy consumed by the farmer for irrigation. And the non-energy outcomes are mostly cropping intensity, cropping area, and adoption of improved irrigation practices and area under the water selling. So the data for all these outcomes, we will be mostly depending on the automated meters as well as the electricity bills of the farmers, as well as the recall data through surveys. We would be comparing for the energy outcomes. We will be comparing. We'll be having a cross-sectional comparison across the treated versus different groups of controls. I will come to this in a minute. For the non-energy outcomes, that is cropping intensity and cropping area. So we would be, if we are able to collect through recall data, we would be able to use the ID for the non-energy outcomes. Now I will go in detail with each levels. What is our design? So at the feeder level, we have to select the control feeder to compare with. First, we try to locate the SPIA feeder where it is, and then try to gather the information on all the feeders which are in the 5 to 10 kilometers of radius of this SPIA feeder. So that this ensures the biophysical characteristics of the or the same, so that the energy consumption is not affected by the biophysical characteristics of the soil or the aquifer. And then we would be using, based on the feeder characteristics, that data that we would be collecting from electricity utilities, we would match. We would use the matching method to ensure we are selecting the feeder which is similar to that of the sky feeder. And then we accumulate the information on the energy consumption and energy commercial losses at the feeder level prior as well as after the sky program implementation. We would either we have in mind to either to check if the parallel trend assumptions have been satisfied, then we would be mostly using DID. And if not, then we would be doing the synthetic control method. I hope we would be getting historical data on the energy consumption at the feeder level. At the farmer level, to identify our control groups, we have two controls in mind. One is is the non-enrolled farmers within the sky feeder. Another group is farmers who are in the non-sky feeder where the program has not been implemented at all. The control group 1, these are farmers who have not opted into the programs. So either due to observed or unobserved characteristics that we are not sure of, but we need to investigate what is the heterogeneity. We need to understand the enrollment heterogeneity with about it, so that so that it helps us to solve the issue. We need to deal with the selection issue here. So if we are able to identify the heterogeneity in terms of enrollment, then we could be able to use the instrumental variable that as an instrumental variable to estimate our local average treatment effect by comparing enrolled and non-enrolled farmers. About the control group 2, these are farmers from the feeders where sky program has not been implemented. That means they are drawing energy from regularly from the normal regular ration feeders. So to select these farmers, we are going for two-step sampling. First, we identify the neighboring feeders, as I explained in the feeder level design as well. So we would be matching the feeders which are similar in characteristics. Once we identify the non-sky feeder which has similar characteristics, then we randomly select these farmers and compare that using the matching methods. We compare the outcomes of the enrolled farmers in the sky with that of the non-sky feeder farmers. So we should be able to theoretically give average impact of the sky program, but however, these estimates might differ from unobserved variance across these groups. So just to understand what these groups are and what are the differences in terms of the farmers, in terms of what farmers gets in these groups. So I will start with the control group 1. So these are non-enrolled farmers. So the non-enrolled farmers do not have solar panels, while that of the enrolled farmers will have. The enrolled farmers gets about 12 hours of electricity, while the non-enrolled farmers gets only 8 hours of electricity, but now it's uninterrupted because they're under the sky. Since enrolled farmer has to change their pricing regime in order to be part of the sky, to unit rate, so everybody is metered, so we can observe their monthly energy consumption from the automated meters. But for the non-enrolled farmers, they might be either in the unit rate or maybe in the flat rate. So they're not not necessarily been metered, but because they because of the technicality that is required to stop them using energy more than 8 hours, there's a watchdog device has been set up for each of the enrolled non-enrolled farmers. Through that, we can actually know what is the energy consumption that has happened for pumping. But however, this has not been used for auditing purpose. It is only used for our energy auditing purposes, but not for billing purposes. Mainly if the consumer is under the flat rate regime. So if we are able to, one thing is that we need to address the selection issue in order for us to arrive the local average treatment effect. So to address the selection issues, we do, since the study is still in the design stage, so we have understanding the program and its operational details. So we have few things in our mind. So this is the structure. This illustrates the structure of the price regime that the consumer will have under the Sky feeder before and after the program. So one of the variable that we are thinking is to look at the tariff structure that the consumer had before the Sky program. Why it is important here is to know because if the consumer was in the flat rate before the Sky program, because the Sky program invariably pushes the farmers to use to convert into the unit rate billing. So maybe there is a less likely that the farmer might move from flat rate to the unit rate if they want to shift. So we need to we are thinking to test the enrollment heterogeneity with respect to the tariff structure prior to the Sky program. Second variable that we are thinking is in terms of the land documentation issues that the consumer might be having. So because in India, usually land is inherited by their through family. Although you have the right to use the land and you have a property right, but maybe at the time of the implementation, because of the family lineage, it might have not converted into his own or her name, which might have pushed not to, which might have affected his enrollment into the program. So we are trying to collect information on that. Another aspects that we are thinking is to because the solar energy, solar panels does require a huge investment in the beginning. So maybe the farmers would invest only when they see that there is an agriculture as a prospect to their family members later in time. So we are trying to collect information on the number of young males who are involved in agriculture. So the probably they have invested mainly because agriculture is a prospect to them. Yeah, we are still thinking about what are the other potential instrumental variable which we could be used, which we can use to address the selection issues. If you have any input on this, that would be very nice. Yeah, coming to the control group 2 and their characteristics.
Yashodha?
Yes.
Could you please finish your presentation in 2 minutes to give a space for the discussant to present the comments?
Yeah. So the control group 2 is they might be having under the different tariff regimes, but however, compared to the control group 1, they get 8 hours of electricity at the interrupted rates. So if the consumer is under the unit rate but still under the non-Sky feeder, their energy consumption can be observed through electricity bills. But if they are under the flat rate, we cannot observe their electricity consumption because they're not metered. Neither it has been mentioned in the electricity bills. So now we have 2 settings here. One is an observed energy. If we measure our energy outcome in an observed energy as an observed energy consumption for irrigation, then we could only compare the group A to C and leave out the group D. So, but what it makes is about 28% of the consumers in each feeders are at least in the flat rate regimes. So this will systematically affects our sampling, the way we sample. So ignoring group D will lead to sampling bias. Instead, if we shift our outcome variable of measurement into recall data, so then we could use for all the A, B, C, D group, then we could solve the sampling bias. But however, we cannot avoid the measurement error which are entering through recall bias. So just to give the summary, because I have different estimates, because I have different control groups and different ways of measuring the output. So if I compare the enrolled versus non-enrolled, then I can use the observed energy data with no sampling bias, but there is I need to address the selection issue. If I compare the A group to C, which is under the non-Sky feeder farmer under the unit rate tariff, then I would end up in, I can use the observed energy data through electricity billing, but I would end up in having a sampling bias. But another estimate that I could estimate is the average treatment effect comparing A across A, C, and D. Then I would have to only use the recall data where I can avoid the sampling bias, but there will be a recall bias. So this is the summary. And my sampling strategy is still in the construction stage. So at the feeder level, we would be stratifying selecting 40 sky feeder out of 92, and we would match another 40 non-sky feeder in the near vicinity. At the feeder level, from these selected sky and non-sky feeders, we will be drawing 300 enrolled, 250 non-enrolled, and 250 non-sky farmers. So the study is still under the design, and we are trying to collect information from the electricity utilities to assess the impact of and we are trying to collect more information at the farmer level to construct the sampling framework. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very
much.
Your
comments will be.
Sure, no problem. And I would like to invite Nick Hagerty from Montana State University to provide his comments.
Hi there.
Can you share your screen, Nick?
Yeah, I'm working on it here.
Okay.
There's an echo for me, but I guess that will go away once you mute. Okay, is that working?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you, and I'm really happy to have the chance to be here and discuss the project. Since I'm a big fan of Emi's work in Gujarat and across South Asia. I've been involved myself in various research projects about Gujarat or about water in Gujarat for a number of years now. So I was really excited to see this project happening. Let me also just say I'm happy to share these slides with the authors if you email me or Ricardo, who also has them. So I wanted to start just by taking just a minute to reiterate why grid, I think for the whole audience, why the grid connected solar pumps are so promising and why the grid connection part of that is so important. So the solar pumps that are not connected to the grid just reduce the marginal cost of pumping, right? So they can reduce carbon emissions and they can expand irrigation access. That's good for the farmers. But in terms of the groundwater depletion, they're likely to worsen the situation. Each extra hour of pumping is basically costless to the farmers, so why not pump more? But if you connect that solar pump to the grid and offer net metering, which is also, I think the presentation called this buybacks, in other settings it's called feed-in tariffs, suddenly you've completely changed the marginal incentives, right? So each hour that you pump is an hour that you could still sell back to the grid and make money from that. So this establishes an opportunity cost of pumping, and so the grid-connected pumps are much more likely to actually reduce groundwater depletion instead of making it worse or even staying the same. So yeah, so as solar prices continue to fall, these solar pumps have this like sort of amazing promise that they might be able to expand access to groundwater and reduce carbon emissions while simultaneously solving the groundwater crisis in India and other countries in an equitable way, where the farmer benefits along the way. So yeah, so that's just to say that this project is tackling some really important questions, and there's a lot at stake here in terms of policy. So it's I think it's very exciting. I think the authors have presented some really well-developed plans to, well thought through to make the most of observational data in this situation, basically. Here, and so then, I have a few further suggestions that to take this further, even further. And to motivate my suggestions, let me just outline how I think about selection bias in this situation. So there's potential for selection bias at both levels of analysis here. Is my, I guess my video isn't Okay, I can't share. Okay, well, I'll keep going. Yeah, okay, so there's potential for selection bias at both levels. The feeders that are chosen for the program might be different from the ones that aren't chosen. The farmers who opt into the program might be different from those that don't. But to me, these are not equal threats, right? So the feeders are selected by the government. So you can think of this as top-down selection. It's based on characteristics that are in principle observable to the government. So in this, for this type of selection bias, it's plausible that if you gather enough information on the feeder characteristics and adjust for them, you can remove that selection bias. In contrast, the farmers are at the farmer level. The farmers are self-selected into the program. So you can think of this as like a bottom-up form of selection, and it is based on information that's known only to the farmer. So it's like private information about how much they're going to benefit, or other things about like how risk-taking they are, or how much they like trying a new program or something. So fundamentally, no amount of covariate adjustment is going to solve that problem. Nothing. There isn't anything you're going to be able to do to completely ensure balance on the fundamental unobservable here, which is the propensity to opt into the program. So if you agree with me on this framework, then maybe we can treat this feeder level treatment as basically as good as random, conditional on some covariates. But then we need some other way to address the farmer level selection problem. So here's one way to do that. So first, like match farmers on their baseline characteristics across the solarized and the non-solarized feeders. And then once you have this matched sample, then you can use the feeder level solarization, that feeder level treatment, as the instrument for individual level participation. So this is just, you can think of this as the treatment on the treated estimate, as compared with what you're doing at a feeder level, which is just the simpler intent to treat estimate of being on one of these feeders or not. This also estimates the late on the farmers who opt in. I'm assuming there aren't any spillovers of the program to farmers who don't. So I think like the benefit of this is that even if the instrument isn't totally perfectly valid, it's at least very interpretable. It's easy to see what it's doing. All this is doing is scaling up the feeder level effect, that intent to treat, by the fraction of the farmers who participate, right? So that's the math of what's going on in the instrumental variables. To me, I think any other instruments that you might come up with are unlikely to be valid, unlikely to meet the exclusion restriction, and if they're not valid, they're also not going to be very interpretable. So I think I would probably recommend just reporting. If you're in that situation, if you don't like this idea and you don't have something better to do, I would probably recommend just reporting the results without the instrument as an association, and then just like discuss what the potential biases are, rather than trying to use an instrument that's unlikely to be valid. Another way to address the farmer level selection problem, though it might be more ambitious than is feasible right now, but I took solace from your last slide where you mentioned small scale RCTs, is an encouragement design RCT. So the idea here is that you could launch you could develop and launch an individual level intervention to further encourage participation, encourage farmers to opt into this program. So restrict the sample to the solarized feeders, and then use that randomized encouragement intervention as the instrument for individual participation. Right? So this would be like even more credible than the strategy I mentioned in the last slide. The risk here is that like you tend to need a very large sample size for encouragement designs, and so you might not have enough power there. It's also obviously costs some money. Okay, so those were my comments about selection. Let me mention one other issue that strikes me as potentially pretty important, and that's about the salience of the electricity payments. So ideally, ideally, I think the payments for electricity in this program would be separate from the loan payments, right? So like the farmer makes a payment, and then completely separately the payment is the same every month, and then completely separately each month they receive like a payment for the amount of electricity that they sold back to the grid. The way that this program is set up is that the proceeds from selling from the buybacks from selling the electricity back to the grid are just a discount on that loan payment. So my worry is that might be less salient than handing the farmer cold hard cash for that electricity. In addition, the bill might be hard to understand. So my idea is if you have a small budget for this, like try sending participants randomized text messages each month that are just like announcing the payment amount from that they're getting from selling that electricity and explaining the bill some more. And I think that there's a couple benefits from this, which is that if you find overall that this program doesn't work well, then there's an immediate question of why not, and this could help you differentiate between the program has a fundamental flaw in it versus it was just about some administrative details of the program, and just tweaking part of it might make a big difference. And then on the flip side, if you find the program doesn't work very well, or if you find that it does work well, then this is an important part about how you scale this up. Okay, and then my last main comment is about statistical power. I've seen in my own work that energy consumption can often have really high variance across farmers in the cross section. So I think that makes it really critical to collect data on the historical energy use, either from bills or recall, just something, so that you can soak up some of that variation and focus on the within farmer variance. And then related to that, I was a little concerned about the sample size that you mentioned on one of the final slides. It strikes me as potentially too small. So if you haven't, maybe perhaps you have, but if you haven't, I encourage you to do careful power calculations for those main outcomes, and specifically using real billing data, so you make sure to get real world estimates of the variance there. So and then I think the implication of that is that getting a larger sample might be worth spending more money on, even if that comes at the cost of fewer variables or less fewer other activities related to the project. But yeah, overall, great work here. I think it's a super exciting project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it evolve.
Thank you very much, Nick. And Yashodha, do you have comments or reactions to Nick's comments?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick, for the great suggestions. Yeah, actually, your comments on this statistical power, yes, we are also thinking we have not made the sample selection yet. We are still enumerating all the farmers in the selected feeders. So we have not made decision yet. Yeah, we would work on that to see how best we can add up more numbers there with the actual power calculation. And your suggestions on the RCT about text messages about the billing as well as.
You're breaking up.
To basically to see. Am I audible?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so yeah, we are also on the same page, like, you know, how best we can actually explain this, like, you know, financial designs of the program, so that, like, you know, farmer really internalize the incentive that the program is bringing in to conserve the energy. So your suggestions on the text messages and all, yeah, actually we have been thinking about actually physical on the financial details of the financial modalities of the schemes, because their billing is right now on an annual basis. They had to really realize for all 1 year to realize the incentives. This is something I think it's also under our nation. Your sessions were great, reiterating our thoughts on that. So on the selection bias issue, I mean, I agree on the fact that, you know, we try a lot of things to avoid or to address these issues. And I was a little bit puzzled about, like, you know, how, like, you know, just using the proportion of people enrolled into the program as an instruct to explain the selection bias, because the program itself mandates, like, you know, if the 70% of the farmers needs to be entering into the program. So that means, like, you know, it's been set out by the program itself. So it's so I'm a bit like nervous about using that as an instruct, because that is a mandation from the program itself.
Yes, I suppose that everything. That was the point I wanted to make also in response to your first comment. That it's not necessarily as top down as you were thinking. Since as Yashodha was saying, there is a minimum number of farmers who need to agree to enroll so that the feeder is selected to become SPIA. So there is really a self-selection to select the feeders, and not only, I mean, that's a self-selection at the feeder level, in addition to the self-selection at the farmer level.
Is there any, Nick, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Do you have any other comment?
Oh, well, I guess just as a, yeah, if I as a follow up just to the last point, you know, if you have any sort of information on like how close people, you know, how close each feeder got to meeting that threat. Okay, you're ahead of me there. Yeah, the RD would be the natural thing if you have any information on like how many farmers agreed to it. But yeah,
yes,
so
but
yeah,
it may be fuzzy. I mean, we won't have a net threshold. That's
right.
What it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, thanks. I think we have exceeded the time that we allocated for this webinar, and I thank everyone, and Yashodha and Marie-Charlotte for the presentation, Nick for coming with the comments, and all of you guys for making the time to be part of this. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next webinar of SPIA.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.